Hello everyone, my name's limerivt, and it's no surprise to everyone who's played a Souls-like game has encountered Elden Ring at some point. Today I'm going to be giving my honest reviews on the game that is Elden Ring. After spending hundreds of hours playing not only the base game but the DLC, I feel like I have a leg to stand on for my opinion on this great game. Elden Ring is a Souls-like action role-playing game developed by FromSoftware, directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki, and has the world building provided by American fantasy writer George R.R. Martin. However, having titles like Bloodborne, Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and Sekiro under its belt, Elden Ring is not the first of its kind developed by FromSoftware. But it's clear to see that the years of game developing in this genre shows that all the things each game did right culminated into the game that is Elden Ring. Where in previous titles you followed a general path to success, Elden Ring allows you multiple avenues and tools to navigate. This game drew from the successful gameplay of Dark Souls 3 while implementing the scenic styles of all Soulsborne titles. This allowed it to be incredibly diverse in design, showing that enemy and landscape appearances drew heavily from Elden Ring's predecessors. Gamers are literally able to customize all aspects of themselves, from their appearance and armor to the spells and incantations they prefer. All you know from the outset is that you play as a tarnished of no renown, blessed by grace, and are compelled to make the journey to the lands between and become an Elden Lord. What that actually means, how one might go about doing that, and what the deal is with that giant glowing golden tree are all things you have to discover yourself. There are so many amazing ways to fight both PvE and PvP, making this game not a one-size-fits-all, but more a build what you want to suit your style type of game. With its pretty massive map, far bigger than I had originally thought, with more content packed into it than any other world game I've played before, I have not had a single moment where I felt the map felt desolate or empty. There was always something to see and explore. The difficulty of the game is refreshing, and I feel like I'm being challenged to improve and innovate as I play the game. Instead of relying on old hacks, the combat has lots of depth and satisfying mechanics to play around with. The excellent combat is further complemented by great build variety with many cool weapons, magic incantations, and Ashes of War to try out. Combat is extremely challenging, but unlike others, if you get stuck on a boss that hinders your game progression, you can simply go off and explore more of the map and come back later. Put through an absolute ringer of emotion, anger as I was beaten down by its toughest challenges, exhilaration when I finally overcame them, and a fair amount of sorrow for the mountains of XP I lost along the way to some of the toughest boss encounters FromSoftware may have ever conceived. If you've ever wanted a game that perfectly encapsulates suffering, Elden Ring is your magnum opus. It's not just a game. It's a relentless, soul-crushing gauntlet of agony that makes you want to grab your balls, twist them like a stress toy, and throw them into the lands between in a desperate act of defiance. Every encounter feels like an abusive relationship. You think you've finally figured out that one attack pattern, dodging and weaving like a pro, only for the boss to whip out a new phase, casually one-shotting you while you sit there wondering why you even try. But for every moment of despair, there's a fleeting glimpse of hope. You finally kill that boss after 247 attempts, your heart pounding as the enemy-fellied message appears. It's euphoric, but also fleeting, because around the corner another challenge awaits, ready to rip you apart all over again. However, this game doesn't come without completely glaring and obvious flaws that not only infuriate, but make me sigh with its complete lack of creativity. In other words, the dungeons and dungeon bosses in this game are a bunch of reused pieces. Get used to fighting the same boss over and over again, mostly just in greater numbers. Get used to the same dungeon enemies and the same traps being thrown at you again and again. This actually wouldn't be so bad if not for the following point. Enemy movesets feel bland, uninspired, and repetitive. While common enemies have always been mildly repetitive, I have the feeling this game is the worst yet. From dogs that leap on you and then stay right in front of you and bite repeatedly, to bosses whose entire moveset is just jumping up and down at you. It feels like less skill is required and more cheesing the enemy by denying them the one thing they're good at. Visually, everything looks amazing, but every boss is either a reskin that you encounter 100 of later in the game, underwhelming or annoying. To me, the worst offender was none other than the final boss. A final boss to a game like this? The Elden Beast? The Elden Beast, are you kidding me? One of, if not the only times, I was disappointed by a boss's actual in-game design rather than annoying moveset. On top of that, it is directly after the Radagon fight, so Lord forbid you used any flasks on that fight. On top of all of this, he is all the way across the already massive field at all times and loves to retreat to there with no chance of hitting him if you got close. They seem to have tried to take the community's general perception of its difficulty and make it more fulfilling, but completely fall flat a lot of the time and forget that it's the overbearing strategic boss battles that make difficulty of it all fulfilling in the first place. The only bosses that follow a fulfilling and strategic, difficult fight are Malenia, who doesn't have a ton of health, but she's incredibly agile and fights at different tempos. For every hit she lands, she gains a portion of health back. Malekith, who is super easy to beat if you face him head on, but given his errant fighting style, you really have to pick your moments or it's game over, and the Crucible Knight, who uses his attacks to slow you down and get you into a defensive position. Hit registration is horrible, and mobs don't even follow game physics as you're constantly dying because attacks just go through enemies. Attacks always clipping the wall even if you're not right on it, and yet enemies will stand on the other side of a door and just keep attack spamming and hitting you through the wall. The hitboxes on the player models are all jacked up, it seems, as you'll be completely behind the NPC while they're attacking and still get hit. The difficulty seems to be more like a random number generator than something that was actually thought out. I'll run into a general NPC and it'll seem like I'm having a harder time fighting the regular NPC than I did an actual boss. In the game, you are completely free to do what you want to from the very start of the game. You can finish the main storyline and beat the final boss, or you can explore the entire map without ever seeing the main bosses. It truly is up to you with no outside influence. Elden Ring doesn't impose any particular playstyle or route on you. Saying that the game's story was well conveyed through the land, bosses, and NPCs is a joke in all aspects. I found that unless I went out of my way to figure out what the story actually was, then I ended up knowing absolutely nothing of what was going on. However, saying that it's mastered the art of showing without telling isn't something that I think is a wow factor for a game or an accomplishment. Everything that could be left ambiguous is discovered through general gameplay and interest, giving players the choice to connect the dots and further become enthralled in the lore. However, 95% of the story was left up to ambiguity, and unless you opened up every single item and deep dived to figure out the lore of the game as a whole, you were left running around not knowing what was going on at all. With no real direction, storyline is bad, leaves you clueless as to where the directions even are. The story as a whole feels absolutely devoid of anything even remotely interesting. Dialogue feels boring, and it relies on factors that are never explained to the player, which makes them seem quite meaningless. Not only that, but the incredibly toxic community of Elden Ring players that exists within the love of the game, unwritten rules that you are to suffer a great deal to have any sort of enjoyment over the game as a whole, and you are to be immediately shunned for using the River Blood Katana in any context, other than fighting Malenia, as well as for spamming powerful long-distance spells, incantations, weapon arts. Doing anything in general that isn't head-on facing the enemy is cheesing. Weapons and abilities are very easily abused in PvP due to the incredible variety this game provides, And though many Soulsborne players understand the unspoken rules of combat when it comes to weapons and abilities like this, there are a great many new players who value easy wins over genuine fair fights. If the game were to be updated more often and adjustments more commonly provided for the most unbalanced tools for combat, the PvP in this game would thrive rather than falling completely flat of its overall intended purpose. Saying that assets are heavily reused from previous games and within the game is a heavy understatement. Having someone like George R.R. Martin apparently involved in the lore is shocking, as the overall narrative style and plot are the same as Dark Souls. If you replaced Elden Ring with First Flame, Sights of Grace with Bonfire, and Tarnished with Chosen Undead, you'd have a hard time distinguishing this from another entry in the Dark Souls saga. Nothing wrong with having a Dark Souls 4, but let's acknowledge that this is just more of the same, which is fantastic for the people who wanted that, but a huge disappointment for people who wanted something new. I think this game overall has been placed on a pedestal and being judged with a completely different set of standards from other games. However, despite all these complaints, Elden Ring is a rare case where a game manages to cement itself as an instant classic. Solid 6 out of 10 will return for another round. And those are my honest thoughts on the game that is Elden Ring. While I do appreciate and love the game, I still think there are a lot of things that could be improved to make this more of a solid 9 or 10 out of 10. If you guys haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell to know when we post new videos. As well, if you have not checked me out on Twitch, I live stream Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. EST. Thank you guys so much for watching this video all the way to the end. I will see you guys in the next Souls-like video. Bye!